PHP treats MySQL select queries as either buffered or unbuffered. Understanding this important concept will help you avoid errors when working with MySQLi. So what's the difference? With a buffered query, the result set is transferred immediately from the database server, and it's stored in PHP memory. By contrast, the results of an unbuffered query remain on the database server, and they're not fetched until required. Both have their advantages and disadvantages. Let's start with the advantages of a buffered query. Because it's in the PHP memory, you can get the number of rows in the result set from the numRows property. The result set's internal pointer can be moved using the dataSeek method, allowing you to reuse the result set. And storing the result in PHP's memory means that further queries can be issued on the same database connection. The main disadvantage is that the larger the number of results, the more memory is consumed. Not surprisingly, the pros and cons of an unbuffered query are the opposite. The main advantage is that leaving the result set on the database server until it's needed consumes less PHP memory. The disadvantages are that you can't find out how many rows are in the result set, nor can you use dataSeek to move the pointer or reuse the results. An unbuffered query blocks further queries from being executed on the same connection. You have to wait until the end of the result set or truncate it. It also increases the load on the database server. So how do you know which type of query is being executed? With non-prepared statements, by default, the query method immediately returns a result set. In other words, it's buffered. Although you can alter this default behavior, the more normal way to execute an unbuffered query is to use the realQuery method. This leaves the result set on the database server. If you previously used the original PHP MySQL extension, realQuery is the equivalent of the old MySQL unbuffered query function. Working with realQuery is a two-stage operation. To retrieve the result, you need to call the useResult or storeResult method. However, storeResult converts it from an unbuffered query to a buffered one. So in practice, useResult is the one you need. With a prepared statement, the default state after calling the execute method is an unbuffered result set. That means you can't immediately use the numRows property or dataSeek method. Nor can you execute other queries if any results are still unused. However, all you need to do is to call the storeResult method on the statement object. This buffers the result, allowing further queries to be executed and giving access to numRows and dataSeek. The alternative is to use the getResult method to assign the result set to a MySQLi result object. This is slightly less portable than storeResult because it uses the MySQL native driver, MySQLND. This became available in PHP 5.3, but it didn't become the default driver until PHP 5.4. All this can appear rather confusing, so let's cut through the complexity with a few simple guidelines. Buffered queries are easier to handle, so I suggest you use them in preference to unbuffered ones most, if not all of the time. This means using the query method for non-prepared statements. With prepared statements, the decision isn't so clear-cut. If the result is going to be consumed immediately, there's no need to buffer it. But if you need to access numRows, dataSeek, or further queries, use storeResult to convert it to a buffered query. Use unbuffered queries for very large result sets. And release resources as soon as they're no longer needed, such as by closing a prepared statement as we did in the previous chapter. We'll look at other ways to free resources later in this chapter.